What kind of plant has been associated with sleep, protection, purification, and emotional healing across nearly every era of human history, and now appears to calm the nervous system in ways modern science can actually measure? Tonight, we're uncovering the story of lavender. Welcome to the Green Room Apothecary, a place where plants are more than remedies or medicine. They're remembered wisdom, part of our collective living history. Step into the garden with me to explore the history, folklore, and science behind the herbs that have shaped human healing for centuries. Whether you're here to learn something new, to unwind, or to gently drift off to sleep, I'm so happy that you're here with me. I'm your host, Nimue, and this is where ancient wisdom meets modern life. Before we settle in today, I'd love to hear where you are in the world and what time it is as you're listening. And if lavender has already found a place in your life, I'd love to know how. Let's begin the way we always do, with presence, with the plant itself. Wherever you are right now, see if you can set everything else gently aside. Soften your jaw and let your shoulders drop. And let your breath slow down just a little. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now, imagine you're standing at the edge of a lavender field. It's late morning. The sun is warm on your skin, but there's a breeze moving through the rows, something cool and easy carrying the scent ahead of it. You take a step forward. The path between the rows is narrow, and as you walk, the long purple spikes brush lightly against your hands. You stop and reach out. Gently wrap your fingers around one long, slender stem. Feel the slight roughness of it, the tiny hairs along the stalk that hold the oils inside. Now, bring it closer and press your fingers gently along the spike of flowers. That scent rises immediately, not soft like lemon balm, and not sharp like peppermint. This is something older, deeper. Floral, yeah, but threaded with something almost green, almost woody, almost like the earth itself. Now breathe it in slowly and let it fill your chest. And notice what begins to shift. Maybe there's a loosening somewhere behind your eyes. Maybe your thoughts slow just slightly, like they've been given permission to stop moving for just a moment. Maybe your breath deepens on its own. Stay here. Breathe in. And exhale. Just you and this field and that scent rising up to meet you. Inhale. And exhale. You don't need to do anything. This is enough. When you're ready, let the image gently soften, but carry that feeling with you, that particular kind of calm that asks nothing of you. Today, we're going deep into lavender, one of the most ancient, most beloved, and most scientifically studied herbs on Earth. We'll trace it from Egyptian mummification chambers to Tudor court intrigue, through the Black Plague, and into modern clinical trials. We'll look at why, after thousands of years, this humble purple flower keeps finding its way back to us. Before we understand what lavender does inside the body, we have to understand what it meant to the people who grew it, burned it, and carried it with them for thousands of years. So let's step out of the modern world for a moment and into the soil of the past. Lavender belongs to the Lamiaceae family, making it a botanical cousin to some of our most beloved medicinal plants, including lemon balm, rosemary, sage, and thyme. Its most widely used species is Lavandula angustifolia, also known as English or true lavender, though its origins are anything but English. There are more than 30 wild species and hundreds of cultivars, but angustifolia remains the gold standard for both medicinal and aromatic use. The name lavender likely comes from the Latin lavare, meaning to wash. This alone tells you something essential about how the Romans understood this plant. It was inseparable from cleanliness, from ritual bathing, from the act of making the body and the spirit fresh again. There's an older Greek name for it too. The ancient Greeks called it nardus, after the Syrian city of Narda. In India, it was known as spikenard, a name that referred to the shape of its tall, spiked flowers. From the very beginning, lavender carried multiple identities: herb, perfume, medicine, ritual object, sacred scent. It was all of those things at once. And beyond its role in medicine, lavender has long belonged to another world as well, the world of symbol, ritual, protection, and quiet magic. For centuries, lavender has been woven into the traditions of folk magic and green witchcraft as a plant of peace, purification, devotion, and gentle spiritual protection. In European folk traditions, bundles of dried lavender were hung above doorways to ward off unwanted energy and invite harmony into the home. It was tucked beneath pillows to encourage peaceful sleep, vivid dreams, and protection from nightmares. Some traditions even believed lavender could calm conflict within a household simply through its presence, softening tempers and bringing people back toward one another. And in many ways, that symbolism mirrors the plant itself. Lavender doesn't feel forceful. It doesn't dominate a space. It changes the atmosphere quietly. Its scent moves through a room almost invisibly, creating a subtle shift in the nervous system before you even consciously realize it's happening. Perhaps that's the part of why it became so associated with energetic cleansing and emotional healing across so many traditions. In forms of green witchcraft, lavender is often used in rituals centered around peace, sleep, love, emotional healing, purification, intuition, and protection. It's commonly added to dream sachets, ritual baths, floor washes, incense blends, and smoke cleansing bundles. Some practitioners place it on altars dedicated to rest, self-love, or ancestral connection. Others weave it into protection charms meant not to aggressively repel, but to create such a calm, harmonious atmosphere that discord simply struggles to remain there. And there's also a long-standing association between lavender and the heart. Not only the physical heart, but the emotional one. Historically, lavender appeared in love spells, hand-fasting ceremonies, and bridal bouquets as a symbol of devotion, fidelity, and calm partnership. In Victorian flower language, it often represented serenity, grace, and quiet affection. And astrologically, lavender has traditionally been associated with the planet Mercury, which at first glance might seem surprising. We often associate Mercury with communication, movement, and intellect, but in herbal astrology, Mercury also governs the nervous system, the breath, and the way signals move throughout the body. And lavender speaks directly to those systems. It soothes overstimulation, it softens mental noise, and it helps the body process stress more gracefully. Some modern herbal astrologers also connect lavender to Virgo, a Mercury-ruled sign deeply concerned with healing, ritual, purification, and care of the body. Others associate it secondarily with Libra because of its strong relationship to harmony, beauty, balance, and emotional equilibrium. And in tarot, Lavender aligns beautifully with temperance, the card of balance, integration, and gentle alchemy. Temperance is not the energy of force or urgency. It's the quiet art of bringing opposing things back into harmony, of calming extremes, of restoring flow where there has been tension. And that feels very much like lavender, a plant that doesn't overpower the body but gently coaxes it back toward equilibrium. Some practitioners also associate lavender with the star, a card connected to healing, restoration, hope, and spiritual calm, especially after periods of grief, exhaustion, or emotional upheaval. And maybe that's why lavender continues to hold such a timeless place in both medicine and magic. Because whether we approach it through chemistry, ritual, folklore, or just intuition, the experience often feels strangely similar. A softening, a clearing, a subtle return to ourselves, not through force, but through gentleness. The earliest known records of lavender use reach back more than 2,500 years to ancient Egypt, where it was used in the sacred and the intimate in equal measure. In the royal embalming chambers, lavender was mixed into the unguents used to prepare bodies for the afterlife. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he reportedly found jars containing materials that still bore traces of lavender's fragrance, over 3,000 years old and still faintly present. But lavender wasn't only for the dead. The wealthy carried it into their daily lives in the form of solid cones of scented wax and oil placed on the head at banquets. As the day's heat melted the cone, perfume including lavender slowly trailed down the body, a living fragrance, a slow, sensory luxury. And Cleopatra, known for her strategic use of scent as a form of power, is said to have used lavender as part of her legendary perfume. One old tale even claims that the snake that killed her was hiding in her lavender bushes. History or myth, we may never know, but the image is perfect, isn't it? Something so beautiful hiding something deadly. The Greeks learned much from the Egyptians when it came to scent and medicine. The philosopher Theophrastus wrote about the healing qualities of fragrance as early as the 3rd century BC, but it was the Romans who truly carried lavender across the world. Roman soldiers packed it on campaigns to dress war wounds. Roman bathhouses, those grand social institutions, steeped bundles of lavender into the water, filling the steam with that unmistakable scent. Roman women hung lavender near their beds to incite the passions. Roman households scattered it across stone floors to sweeten the air, the same strewing habit we'd see later with lemon balm in medieval monasteries. The physician Dioscorides, writing in 77 AD under Emperor Nero, gave us the first detailed written account of lavender's medicinal uses. Taken internally, he noted, it relieved indigestion, headaches, and sore throats. Applied externally, it cleaned wounds and treated burns and skin ailments. Pliny the Elder added his own observations. Lavender helped with menstrual problems, kidney disorders, digestive upset, and insect bites. And as the Roman Empire spread, roads, aqueducts, armies, and herb bundles traveling together across Europe, lavender traveled with it. Into Britain, into France, into the northern parts of the continent, where it would never have been able to grow on its own. After the fall of Rome, knowledge of lavender survived in monasteries, in the quiet, meticulous hands of nuns and monks who copied ancient manuscripts and tended to their gardens. Under a royal edict of the Holy Roman Empire in 1812 AD, monasteries were required to grow a list of medicinal plants, and lavender was among them. One of the most fascinating figures in this chapter is Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German nun, mystic, composer, and healer who wrote extensively about the plants in her care. Hildegard used oil of lavender to treat head lice and fleas, a use that remarkably has since been validated by modern clinical research. She also mixed lavender with brandy and gin to make a migraine cure, and she wrote about it as a tool for spiritual clarity, something that cooled excess heat in both the body and the mind. In Tudor England, when Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries, lavender escaped confinement and spread into domestic gardens. Ladies of the manor wove it into sachets, laid linens over the growing plants to dry, and burned it to freshen sick rooms. Queen Elizabeth I herself, known for her frequent migraines, drank lavender tea and is said to have demanded fresh lavender on her table throughout the year, putting considerable strain on the English growers. And then came the plague. During the Black Death, which swept through Europe multiple times between the 14th and 17th centuries, lavender was believed to offer protection. Glove makers in 16th century France, who perfumed their wares with lavender, seemed to escape cholera at unusually high rates. And this was noted and remembered. But the most famous piece of plague folklore is the story of the 4 thieves. The tale goes like this. A band of grave robbers, 4 of them, were caught looting the bodies and belongings of plague victims. When brought before the authorities, they were made a deal. Confess the secret of how they had survived such close contact with the disease, and their lives would be spared. Their answer was of vinegar, now known as 4 Thieves vinegar, a potent blend containing lavender, rosemary, garlic, cloves, and distilled vinegar. They had washed themselves in it. They had soaked the stolen goods in it, and somehow they had not contracted the plague. We now understand the likely mechanism. Lavender, rosemary, and cloves all contain potent antimicrobial compounds. But in the 17th century, it felt like something closer to magic. The story spread, the vinegar spread, and lavender's reputation as a protector of the living was cemented in European folk memory. By the Victorian era, lavender had become deeply fashionable, associated with cleanliness, femininity, and refinement. Queen Victoria was one of its most devoted champions. She appointed a personal purveyor of lavender essence to the royal household, a woman named Miss Sarah Sprules, making lavender an official part of their royal domestic ritual. It was used to wash walls, freshen linens, and stuff sachets between sheets, and scent furniture polish. Young Victorian women carried lavender in their cleavage, apparently to attract suitors. Newlyweds stuffed it into their mattresses to encourage marital harmony. And then, somewhat ironically, lavender's very popularity became its downfall. By the early 20th century, the scent had become so thoroughly associated with elderly women and old-fashioned medicine that it fell out of fashion entirely. It would take a burned hand in a French laboratory to bring it back. In the early 20th century, French chemist René Gadefas was working on his laboratory when he suffered a severe burn. In an act of spontaneous desperation, he plunged his hand into the nearest liquid, which happened to be lavender essential oil. The pain stopped. The burn healed quickly with no infection and no scarring. Gadefas was stunned. He devoted the rest of his career to the scientific study of essential oils, and in doing so, essentially founded the field of modern aromatherapy. The word aromatherapy itself is attributed to him. Lavender essential oil went on to be used in both world wars to dress wounds when medical antiseptics were in short supply. And lavender's story isn't only European. In traditional Chinese medicine, lavender is classified as a cooling herb, used to treat anxiety, fever, infection, and to move stagnant energy. It targets the heart and liver meridians, calming what TCM calls Shen disturbance, a restless, unsettled spirit. In Ayurveda, lavender is considered tridoshic, meaning it can balance all 3 doshas, though it does have an affinity for pacifying pitta, cooling excess heat and inflammation in the mind and body. It is used as a medya herb, a brain tonic, often combined with other nervines to ease mental strain. In Unani medicine, the system developed by the great physician Avicenna, lavender appears as a mufere, a heart-lifting herb used for melancholia, headache, and nervous exhaustion. 3 systems, 3 continents, 1 agreement. Lavender is medicine for the mind that cannot rest. So, across deserts and oceans and centuries, lavender has been trusted, carried, burned, and brewed. And now, finally, science is beginning to explain why. For thousands of years, lavender has been described as the way poets describe love, in sensation and metaphor and feeling. It calms the restless mind, it lifts the heavy heart, it carries the sleepless into sleep. But modern science is finally asking, what exactly is this plant doing inside the body to make all of that true? Let's step out of the garden for a moment and into the lab. The flowers and leaves of lavandula and gustifolia are packed with volatile essential oils, but the two that drive the most of lavender's medicinal action are linalool and linalool acetate. Linalool is a naturally occurring terpene alcohol, inflammatory, analgesic, and deeply sedative. Linalool acetate is its counterpart, contributing to lavender's characteristic floral sweetness and amplifying linalool's calming effects. Together, they account for roughly 85% of lavender's essential oil composition. Both compounds are rapidly absorbed, whether inhaled through the nose, applied to the skin, or taken orally. Studies have shown that linalool appears in the blood within minutes of skin contact through massage. Beyond these two main players, lavender also contains camphor, cyanyl, terpene, and flavonoids, compounds that contribute to its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. This is a remarkably complex chemical profile for a plant that smells like a grandmother's linen drawer. Every compound has a job, and every compound is working. And here's where things get fascinating. You may remember from our lemon balm episode that GABA is the brain's primary inhibitory transmitter. Its job is to slow down the relentless firing of neurons. It's your brain's natural braking system. Lavender works on GABA too, but through a slightly different mechanism than lemon balm. Research shows that linalool modulates GABA receptors, directly binding to them and enhancing their calming activity. This effect is remarkably similar to the mechanism of benzodiazepines, the class of pharmaceutical drugs that includes diazepam and lorazepam. The reason your nervous system responds when you inhale lavender isn't just placebo. It isn't just nostalgia. It is, in part, your GABA receptors responding to a compound that fits them, the way a hand fits a familiar glove. Animal studies have consistently shown that lavender's anxiolytic effects are comparable to anxiety prescription medications without the dependency and without the cognitive fog. One of the most remarkable developments in lavender research is pharmaceutical-grade oral lavender oil preparation called siloxane. Developed in Germany and standardized at 80 milligrams per capsule, siloxane has been tested in multiple large randomized control trials, which is the gold standard of clinical research. And the results have been striking. In patients with generalized anxiety disorder, siloxane significantly reduced anxiety scores, performing comparably to lorazepam in head-to-head trials, but without the sedation, dependency risk, or withdrawal effects associated with benzos. In patients mixed with anxiety and depression, it improved mood, sleep quality, and overall well-being. A 2019 meta-analysis of 5 clinical trials did confirm siloxane exerts significant anxiolytic effects across a range of anxiety presentations. What makes this especially interesting is how it works. Researchers believe that siloxane doesn't act like a sedative, pushing the brain into sleep. Instead, it appears to reduce the underlying anxiety that prevents sleep in the first place. It quiets the noise, and the sleep follows naturally. And just a reminder that I'm an herbalist and your host, not a doctor. But I think there's something profoundly meaningful in the fact that this ancient herb has earned its way into clinical literature, not just as a curiosity, but as a genuine therapeutic agent. Beyond GABA, lavender touches several other neurological systems. Studies show that linalool reduces cortisol levels, the body's primary stress hormone. In controlled research settings, participants exposed to lavender aromatherapy showed measurably lower cortisol responses to stress tasks than control groups. There's also emerging evidence for lavender's effect on serotonin pathways, the neurotransmitter system associated with mood regulation and emotional stability. Some research suggests that lavender may inhibit serotonin reuptake transporters, similar in principle to SSRI antidepressants, although the effect is gentler and the mechanism not yet fully mapped out. And like lemon balm, lavender appears to inhibit the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine. That's the neurotransmitter crucial for memory and learning. By preserving acetylcholine, lavender may support cognitive clarity alongside its calming effects. This is not a plant that simply sedates you. It's a plant that helps your nervous system find its own equilibrium. Lavender's effects extend beyond the brain, too. Research supports its role as a mild hypotensive agent, meaning it gently lowers blood pressure. This aligns with centuries of historical use for palpitations of the heart and nervous tension in the cardiovascular system. It is also a proven analgesic. Studies show that linalool reduces the perception of both chemical and thermal pain. In clinical settings, lavender aromatherapy has been used in labor wards, ICUs, and post-surgical recovery rooms to reduce pain scores and decrease the need for pain medication. Its anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties have been well documented since World War I, when lavender oil was used on battlefields to prevent wound infection. Modern research confirms it is active against a range of bacteria. One of lavender's greatest strengths is its incredible safety profile. For most people, lavender, as tea, diluted essential oil, or standard oral preparations, is very well tolerated. Clinical trials have reported minimal adverse events even over extended periods of use. However, there are some important things to know. Because lavender interacts with GABA receptors, it may enhance the effects of sedatives, sleep medications, or anti-anxiety drugs. So if you take any of these, speak with your healthcare provider before adding concentrated lavender preparations into your routine. There is also research indicating that some compounds in lavender essential oil may have mild hormonal activity, specifically weak estrogenic and anti-androgenic effects. A few case reports have linked repeated topical application of lavender and tea tree oil in prepubescent boys with temporary gynecomastia. This does not mean lavender tea or occasional use is harmful, but it is a reason to avoid long-term or heavy topical application of concentrated lavender oil, especially for young children and individuals with hormone-sensitive conditions. During pregnancy and breastfeeding, lavender aromatherapy appears to be generally safe in moderate amounts, but concentrated oral preparations and high-dose essential oil use should be avoided until more research is available. Please always use discernment when integrating any plant in your routine, especially if you're managing a health condition or taking medication. So, what we're seeing is remarkable. A plant that humans have trusted for 3,000 years for wounds, grief, sleepless nights turns out to be modulating GABA receptors, lowering cortisol, supporting the cardiovascular system, and fighting infection. Ancient intuition and modern science arriving again at the same place. Now, let's step back out of the lab and into the garden to talk about how you can actually bring this plant into your hands. If you're lucky enough to have lavender growing, and it is a generous, low-maintenance plant once established, timing your harvest is everything. The very best moment to cut lavender is when the buds have fully formed, but the flowers haven't yet opened. At this stage, the essential oil content is at its peak. The plant is holding everything inside, waiting. Once the flowers open fully, the oils begin to dissipate. Cut them in the morning, after the dew has dried but before the midday heat. This is when the aromatic oils are most concentrated in the stalks. Use sharp scissors or pruning shears, and cut the stems long, about 2/3 of the way down the plant. This encourages the plant to flush new growth for a second harvest later in the season. And never take more than 1/3 of the plant at once if you want it to thrive. Once you've gathered your bundles, the next step is keeping all that aromatic goodness intact. Lavender dries beautifully, more forgiving than many delicate herbs. Gather 8 to 10 stems into a loose bundle. Tie them with kitchen twine and hang them upside down in a warm, dry place with good airflow and no direct sunlight. The drying process typically takes 2 to 4 weeks, and you'll know when they're ready when the flowers feel crisp and the stems snap cleanly rather than bending. And once they're dry, strip the flowers from the stems over a clean bowl. They'll fall off easily with a light brushing motion. Store the dried flowers in an airtight glass jar away from light and heat. Properly stored lavender will hold its potency and fragrance for a year or more. Lavender tea is one of the simplest and most immediate ways to work with this plant, and it's a ritual worth doing slowly. 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried lavender flowers per cup. Like lemon balm, lavender benefits from water that isn't quite boiling, around 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, to protect those delicate volatile oils. Pour the water over the flowers. Cover your mug immediately to trap the steam, and steep for 5 to 7 minutes. Longer than 10 minutes can pull out too much of lavender's bitter camphor notes, which tends to make the tea soapy and unpleasant, so find the sweet spot. Lavender pairs beautifully with honey, chamomile, lemon balm, or a small slice of fresh lemon. At night, it becomes a ritual of transition, from the noise of the day into something quieter. If you want something more concentrated, a lavender tincture is straightforward to make. You fill a glass jar loosely with dried lavender flowers, cover completely with 80 proof vodka, making sure the flowers are fully submerged. And the dried flowers will expand as they absorb the liquid. Seal the jar and tuck it away in a dark cupboard for 4 to 6 weeks, remembering to shake it gently every few days. Once it's ready, strain it through cheesecloth into a dark glass dropper bottle. A standard folk tincture ratio is approximately 1 part dried herb to 5 parts alcohol. A few drops in a small glass of water before bed makes for a gentle nervine preparation. For a children's preparation, or anyone avoiding alcohol, substitute vegetable glycerin for the vodka. Glycerites are sweeter, slightly less potent, but still effective and wonderfully shelf-stable. For topical use, lavender-infused oil is easy and lovely. Fill a small jar with dried lavender flowers. Cover with a carrier oil, jojoba or sweet almond work really well, and let it infuse in a warm, sunny windowsill for 2 to 4 weeks, or in a slow cooker on the lowest setting for a few hours. Then strain it and bottle it. This becomes your base for everything from massage oils to simple salves. And a note on dosage. Lavender is gentle, but more is not always better. As a tea, 1 or 2 cups in the evening is a lovely therapeutic dose, and as a tincture, 2 to 4 milliliters before bed is a reasonable starting point. If you're using concentrated essential oil topically or in a diffuser, always dilute it, and less is genuinely more. And after all of this, the history, the chemistry, the careful logic of preparation, there comes a moment where knowledge gives way to something quieter. Because at a certain point, the plant stops being something you study. It becomes something you live with. Let's step out of the information for a moment and into something a little more personal. I don't actually remember the first time I personally encountered lavender. It feels like one of those plants that has always existed quietly in the background of my own life. Like something woven into a memory before I was old enough to notice it directly. I remember driving past lavender fields as a child, the soft purple rose moving past the car window in long stretches of color. I remember its scent lingering in handmade soaps, tucked into linen closets, or drifting through the homes of friends growing up. It's one of those fragrances that somehow feels both familiar and distant at the same time. Ancient. Almost. And over the years, my relationship with lavender has become less about noticing it and more about returning to it. These days, I work with lavender most of the time topically. A few drops in oil rubbed into the shoulders at the end of a long day, or a warm bath filled with steam and lavender scent rising slowly into the air. There's something about the ritual of it that feels deeply restorative, not dramatic or intense, just quietly comforting. Occasionally, I'll mix a little bit of lavender into an herbal smoke blend with tobacco. And also occasionally, I'll put a couple buds of lavender into my French press coffee. Soft, floral, slightly earthy. It changes the texture of the experience completely, adding something slower, gentler, and more aromatic. And maybe that's part of lavender's particular magic. It doesn't usually arrive as a grand revelation. Instead, it lingers around the edges of life for years, quietly weaving itself into routines, memories, rituals, and moments of rest, until one day you realize it's become something familiar enough to feel like home. And I think that's the quiet genius of this plant. It doesn't overpower, it doesn't demand, it simply creates the conditions for rest. And from there, everything else follows. And so, after all of this ancient Egypt and plague-era France and modern clinical trials and a quiet cup of evening tea, we arrive, as we always do, at integration. Let's open up the apothecary cabinet. Inside today, we'll gather lavender's essential gifts, distilled into something simple, something you can carry with you. Lavender is the anxiety softener. Through its action on GABA receptors and cortisol suppression, lavender measurably reduces anxiety in clinical trials, performing comparably to pharmaceutical options without the dependency risk. Lavender is a sleep companion, not by sedating the body, but by quieting the mind that won't let the body rest. Lavender creates the conditions for natural restorative sleep. Lavender is the wound healer, with potent antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. Lavender has dressed wounds from ancient Rome to World War battlefields. The science fully supports the folklore here. Lavender is the heart steadier, a mild hypotensive and cardiovascular tonic. Lavender gently supports the heart under stress, physically and emotionally. And lavender is the ancient protector. From Tutankhamun's tomb to plague-era vinegar to Victorian linen sachets, lavender has been humanity's companion through illness, grief, and uncertainty. Something in us has always known it was good to have nearby. And here's your homework for this week, if you'd like. Find a bundle of lavender, dried, fresh, a small sachet, a drop of properly diluted essential oil for your pillow. Find some lavender, and before you sleep tonight, take one slow, intentional breath of it. Notice what happens in your chest, in your shoulders. And then, if you're curious, brew a cup of tea. Sit with it somewhere quiet and give yourself the 5 minutes it takes to steep. And that's it. You don't need to know the mechanism. You don't need the history. Just notice what the plant does when you let it be near you. If you'd like to start with quality dried lavender or an oil, I've linked a few of my trusted sources in the project notes. Those are affiliate links that support the Green Room Apothecary. It's a simple way to keep this garden growing at no extra cost to you. And if you'd like to go deeper, the full bibliography for today's episode is in the show notes as well. Until next time, keep your roots deep and your leaves reaching for the sun. Stay wild and stay well.